Well, I am so glad to see you today because I've got to share something with you that is just a great fear for me. I need somebody to talk to. Because I think sometimes it's really hard for us as women because we're supposed to have it all together, especially when we're moms. But I guess if I had to think about what my greatest fear is, it would probably be my son Rory. He's high functioning autism spectrum and he's 20. And sometimes I had one of the Special Olympics moms say to me years ago, it's almost more difficult because he is high functioning, finding his place because he's not physically disadvantaged, and he's also a boy, as you know. But, you know, you have a son, they don't want mom telling them what to do. But my biggest fear is that probably that I leave this earth without him being settled with the love of his life, finding his purpose, and being able to care for himself. And I just have to say that out loud because I know that just sheds light on it.
It is important that we share our fears and just the greatest cries of our heart with other people, because sometimes we feel like we're alone. You know, we feel like nobody else can understand this fear that I have, or when we keep it to ourselves, we kind of keep it in the dark. But when we talk about it with other people, they can shed light on it and give us a perspective that we probably never had before, or we wouldn't be carrying it with such a burden. I have a fear, a great fear, kind of to piggyback off what I'm talking about parenting. I think in everything I've said about parenting, I think my greatest fear is that my children will not choose God. And I think an even deeper fear than that is that it might be my fault. I worry that in all my efforts to teach them about God, that I might push them away from God, because I know a lot of people that I grew up in church, my parents were in ministry, and I never want to step foot in a church again. And that is just terrifying to me, to think that I might play a role in that. You know, in praying about it and in really thinking about what do I do, because my kids are manipulative and they say things like, "You're cramming the Bible down our throat, Mom." And I think, am I? That's not what I want to do. But I just feel like God just says, stay the course, trust me, commit your ways to me. You know, my life verse is Proverbs 3:5-6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will direct your paths. So in everything, I have to trust him, look to him, rely on him. It's not my understanding, it's just committing my ways to him, whether it's what church I choose to go to, what ministry I decide to be a part of, how I choose to try to talk to my kids about God.
And you know, just listening to you guys just makes me stand here and think, well, let's see, I wanted to have this baby. God sent him to me at the age of 38. He knew you have autism, so it didn't take God by surprise. Maybe it did me, right? And so kind of like, for some reason, Abraham and Isaac have been on my heart lately, so kind of like that. He's gonna take care of it. But it's that one foot in front of the other day, one day at a time. We wanted to read a few things about fear, and then we want to share some of the things that you all left in our box up here. Here's a little quote I found. A businessman once constructed a worry chart to keep a record of his fears. He discovered that 40% of his worries involved things that probably wouldn't happen, 30% involved past decisions that he couldn't unmake, 12% regarded other people's criticisms, and 10% involved his health. He concluded that only 8% of his worries were really legitimate, if there is such a thing. That is, things he could actually do something about. So we also have a list of 10 fears of women in descending order. Then Chantee's going to read these. This is a survey of 500 random women between the ages of 18 and 80.
So the top 10 fears of women between 18 and 80. Number 1, the loss of a loved one, whether it be a spouse, children, or parents. Number 2, debilitating illness or terminal disease. Number 3, failure. Number 4, old age, becoming senile. Number 5, the unknown, the what ifs. 6, loneliness. 7, dependency on others. 8 is rejection. 9, specific critters like snakes, roaches, and rats. And number 10, being judged unfairly.
So let's read some of y'all's, and we're going to do this. We certainly can't go into a lot of detail today, but find somebody either afterwards or at church to pray with you about this if you'd like, or to talk with. Okay? So let's read a few of these. All right, here's the first one. Salvation, that my kids, my life in general, where I may live, things like that, etc.
This is my greatest fear is not doing God's plan. God has not given me a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and a sound mind.
And the next one is fear of the dark. I still have that sometimes, especially since my vision is so bad.
Fear of the unknown future.
So we're kind of all in this together, right? Blank.
My fear is going to hell, spending eternity in hell. That is why I'm a Christian, because I want to go to heaven.
Losing my husband.
Fear of failure with money, family, career, parenting, and worship.
Coming to the end of life, not having lived with a purpose, ending up alone, not being able to support myself. I like being self-sufficient. I think we women do struggle with wanting to be self-sufficient.
Being obedient when God tells you to do something and you do not understand why. Uprooting everything that you know and love. The fear of not knowing is the worst.
My son taking his life.
That's scary. Being able to continue to be able to financially support my family since being laid off. However, my God is always faithful and I will continue to trust in him. Proverbs 3, 5, and 6.
I love this one. Screwing up what God's called me to do. Deciding to walk away from Jesus, believing the lie that he's not worth it.
Being alone in this world. So we are, we're in this together, and I'm sure some of these that you didn't write, that somebody else wrote, resonates with you. You know, we all have great fears. I think a lot of people are afraid of failure, whatever it is that God's called you to do. You know, God says that he equips those he calls. I've had a real fear for many years of being in ministry and just failing to fulfill what God called me to do, and just falling. And I have done that before. A few years ago, I was at my son's wrestling. I was on staff at a church. I was a pastor, and I was at my son's wrestling tournament. It was a regional. It was the regional tournament for whether or not he got to win the region and whether or not he got to go to state. And my son's a very competitive athlete. And we were at the tournament, and his match, I don't know if you know anything about wrestling, but when you have a kid on their back, the ref will put his fingers down. This means 3 points. So he'll put his fingers down, but he watches to see whether or not he's going to pin him or he's just going to give him the back points. And so they wait until they waffle, and then when they get out of that position, it's either a pin or it's 3 points. So my son had this kid on his back, and the ref put his 3 fingers down, meaning he's going to give him his 3 points. But time went on, and when they got out of position, the ref forgot to show the scorekeepers the 3 points. My son ended up losing the match, so he lost his regional title against his arch enemy, his arch rival, and I went ballistic. And I said things I shouldn't have said. I acted in a way I shouldn't have acted. I humiliated myself, and I knew I did. I was frustrated. I was angry. I was so hurt for my son. You know, I couldn't fix it. You know, you just want to fix it so badly. My son was bawling and crying, and it's not fair, it's not fair. And so if that wasn't bad enough, I drove home the whole way like, oh my God, I cannot believe I did that. I cannot believe the way I acted. And the next day, the pastor at my church gets a letter from someone who was there and saw the whole thing and told him everything I said and everything I did. And sent an anonymous letter. And so my pastor calls me. He didn't think it was true because he'd never seen that side of me. So he's like, I don't know where this came from, and I'm sure there's no truth to this at all, but I just wanted you to see this letter. So I read the letter, and I had to tell him, actually, it is true. Actually, that is exactly what I did. And I felt terrible about it, and it was so humbling, and it was mortifying, and I was so afraid at that point that I was the biggest hypocrite in the world. I thought, I will never be able to minister to another person again. I will never, this is really who I am. This is like, I am a hypocrite. I don't have my act together. I don't know how to behave in public. And, you know, I just really had to take that to God and just say, the fact is I have to own it. I was mad at, speaking of unforgiveness, I'm still mad at the lady that wrote the letter 3 years ago. But my husband kept saying, Chantee, don't be mad at her. You did that, you know, just own it and move past it. And my pastor was so gracious because he was like, this is not who you are. This one moment does not define who you are. You are still called of God. You are still a child of God. You are still a light in the world. But I was so afraid that that everybody saw me that way. I thought, my children are probably like, my mom, this is how she is, and this is what she does. And it took me a couple of years to really get past, that is not who I am. That is not who I am. You know, my pastor told me at that time, he goes, sometimes it's like there's a bullet in the chamber and you gotta figure out what set it off. So he said, you know, you just really need to figure out what the deal was and what that was about. But it doesn't change who you are. It doesn't change what God's called you to do. So I have fears like that, and I can just really get anxiety thinking everywhere I go, you know, if I just say the slightest little thing, or I'm rude to the cashier, not rude to the cashier, but if I'm not friendly and I'm having a bad day or whatever, I'm like, people are going to think this or people are going to think that. And, you know, but ultimately, just as we show other people grace, you know, we've got to accept that same grace for ourselves and know that we all have fears, we all have insecurities, we all have failed, you know, we've all fallen short. But God's grace is the whole gospel message. You know, He's called us to a life of faith and grace. And when we fall down, you get back up, you cling to God, you find people that you can talk to that will help you, and you keep going.
So we're going to close with this. So the battle over fear is fought on two fronts, your part and God's part. We don't often read much out of Ecclesiastes that's different, but Ecclesiastes 11:10 says, your part is to banish the anxiety from your heart. And Ecclesiastes 9:11 says, the race is not to the swift or the battle to the strong. So you're partners with God. And we all have fears, and we're all human. Thank you. Well, it is my pleasure to introduce you to the lady who made all this possible today, because trust me, I don't have the crafty thing. All the people that come to Chick-fil-A know this. The flowers, all this stuff. She did this. And she will tell you about Alba Women's Center. And when she's done, we've got a little activity. Y'all don't run off, we're going to do door prizes. So this is Miss Sandy Fireisen, and she has the floor.
Great day to just sit and be real together and be ministered to in God's love. And welcome to our center, to Alba Women's Center. ABBA is an acronym for All Babies Born Alive, and we are a pro-life Christian organization. We're here to just love the girls that are having problems, facing problems and difficulties, and to supply resources in Christian love to them, not to be judgmental, but to receive them in God's love and give them a hand up. And just try to network with all the pastors in the area and whatever